Today in Washington, the acting director of the Central Intelligence Agency met for more than an hour with Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham and Kelly Ayotte from New Hampshire, along with the UN Ambassador Susan Rice. The three Republican senators emerged from that meeting saying that they were honored by the fact that the CIA director would meet with them, just as three random senators and not in some official capacity testifying before a committee on the Hill. They said they really appreciated the fact that the administration and the intelligence community was going to such lengths to assuage their concerns, to directly, personally answer their questions about the Libya attack in a closed-door meeting with the CIA director himself, even though these are just three random senators who are not even the chairman of anything. I mean, the senators said their questions were answered as best as could reasonably expected, and that they were willing to consider on its merits the president's nominee for Secretary of State or any other cabinet position. They were willing to hear out those nominations fairly and without prejudice. Yeah, right. As if. Of course, that's not the way it went. Here's actually what happened after that meeting today.
We're not going to consider this nomination until we get basic answers to our concerns. All I can tell you that the concerns I have are greater today than they were before, and we're not even close to getting the basic answer.
We are significantly troubled by many of the answers that we got and some that we didn't get.
I want to say that I'm more troubled today, knowing, having met with the acting director of the CIA and Ambassador Rice.
Could you support her as Secretary?
I have many more questions that need to be answered.
You just met for more than an hour with the Director of Central Intelligence and with the person about whose comments on a Sunday show you say you have so many questions about. And after a personal, more than an hour-long closed-door meeting just for you, who, again, you run nothing, right? But just for you, just to answer your personal questions, one-on-one, face-to-face with those two officials, all you can say is, boy, hey, you know, I have so many questions. Isn't it starting to seem possible that no matter what answers these guys are given, no matter what access to what information and what officials, they are still just going to keep saying they still have more questions? Here's one possibility about what maybe is really going on here. Back in 2004, a guy named Mitt Romney was the governor of the state of Massachusetts. If you don't remember who that is, he was a private equity guy from Massachusetts. He ran the Olympics one year. Anyway, back in 2004, he was in the middle of his one and only term as Massachusetts governor. That same year, the Democratic Party's nominee for president was a senator from the same state, John Kerry of Massachusetts. If John Kerry had won the presidential election that year, his Senate seat would have become open. So the governor of Massachusetts, the Republican, Mitt Romney, would have been able to appoint somebody to fill John Kerry's Senate seat. The Massachusetts legislature, totally dominated by Democrats, was cognizant that their Republican governor would probably pick a Republican to fill John Kerry's Senate seat if Kerry got elected president. And so the Massachusetts state legislature decided to change the law. They changed the law so that only a special election could fill a vacant Senate seat. And until that special election happened, the seat would just have to be empty. Mitt Romney tried to veto that new law, but the legislature overrode his veto, thereby stripping Governor Romney of his power to choose a replacement for Senator John Kerry. Of course, that all ended up being a moot point because John Kerry didn't win that presidential election that year, and so he stayed on as senator. But then fast forward 5 years. It's 2009. New president, Barack Obama. The country embroiled in a big debate over national health reform. Those who were against it to the point of rage. And those who wanted it were excited to be on the cusp of achieving something they had failed to achieve for decades. At the time, the Democrats had a 60-seat majority in the United States Senate. 60 seats is a filibuster-proof supermajority. That is enough to pass health reform. And that 60-seat supermajority for the Democrats included Massachusetts Senator Ted Kennedy. Senator Kennedy had spent his career trying to pass health reform. It was his life's work. He had done it at the state level with that guy, Mitt Romney. He had worked on it and led on the issue nationally for decades. It was his signature issue. But before he was able to see health reform finally signed into law, Senator Ted Kennedy lost his life to brain cancer. Senator Kennedy died in August of 2009. And when Ted Kennedy died, that meant that his seat did become empty in Massachusetts. And the Democrats no longer had their 60-vote filibuster-proof supermajority, which, frankly, they really needed to be able to pass health care. They were short one vote. Now, knowing that this might happen, and this is really dramatic, knowing that this might happen, that it might turn out this way, before he died, Senator Ted Kennedy took a very dramatic step to plan for the future of the health reform law he had worked for his whole life. This health reform law that his death might make impossible to pass. Thinking about the effect that his death might have on the prospect of passing health reform, Senator Kennedy wrote a letter before he died urging that the governor of Massachusetts, who by that time was a Democrat, urging that the governor of Massachusetts be allowed to fill an empty Senate seat if one were to open up. And with Mitt Romney gone, the Massachusetts state legislature agreed. And so they changed the rules again. So the new Democratic governor, this man, DeVal Patrick, could fill Ted Kennedy's seat with an interim office holder until a special election could be held, thereby restoring, with this interim office holder, the Democrats' 60-vote margin in the Senate. And so at the last minute, with that assist from the recently departed lifelong champion of health reform, Ted Kennedy, the Democrats filled his seat with an interim senator, and they squeaked the health reform bill through with 0 Republican votes, and President Obama signed it into law, and now everybody calls it Obamacare. Even the Democrats call it Obamacare, and they mean that in a good way. But then, in the meantime, there was the small matter of the special election to elect somebody to take over the full remaining portion of Senator Kennedy's term. It was a strange election to permanently fill Ted Kennedy's Senate seat. There was only one race on the ballot in that election. The turnout in Massachusetts was very low. It took place amid a national right-wing backlash to the Democrats passing health reform with 0 Republican votes. Tea Party money and Republican money from all over the country poured into the state of Massachusetts. And this unknown guy, who happened to be a Republican, won that special election in January 2010. I mean, the next time Massachusetts got a chance to reconsider that vote for Scott Brown was 2.5 years later. And in that election, which was this past one that just happened, Massachusetts, frankly, reverted to form and picked the Democrat. They picked Elizabeth Warren to oust Scott Brown from that Senate seat that he held for less than one term. But actually, the Elizabeth Warren-Scott Brown race was pretty close by Massachusetts standards. The margin in the Senate race, this election, had the Democrat winning by 8 points, which sounds like a lot. And in a sort of normal state, that would be a lot. But in the presidential race, on that same night in Massachusetts, the Democrat won the presidential race by a heck of a lot more than 8 points. The Democrat won the presidential race by 23 points. And that is a fairly normal margin by which Democrats beat Republicans in the state of Massachusetts. So given that, Scott Brown losing by only 8, that can be considered kind of a victory. It's at least pretty close. And after that loss, that Scott Brown loss, and that incredibly expensive and incredibly hard-fought race, immediately thereafter, Republicans wanted to talk again about how they could try to get Scott Brown back to Washington. And now today, to them, it seems so close they can taste it. Because although John Kerry is still a senator from Massachusetts, after his very high-profile role in the Obama campaign and a very high-profile speaking gig at the Democratic National Convention where he brought the House down, after that, John Kerry's name was instantly put forward as one possibility, a leading possibility to succeed Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State. And that, of course, would result in him leaving his Senate seat after all, which would mean that there would be a temporary replacement appointed, and then there would have to be another special election to fill out the rest of his term, in which Scott Brown presumably would be the Republican nominee again, which would be the best chance, again, that Massachusetts could ever have of putting a Republican in the Senate anytime soon, which is why Republicans got so excited when John Kerry's name was floated as the potential next Secretary of State. His name was floated, along with one other name for that job. Do you remember who the other name was? Republican senators were very, very quick to point out that they would really prefer John Kerry to be the nominee for Secretary of State over this Susan Rice person. A ringing endorsement for John Kerry from Republicans in Washington. Because, of course, if John Kerry becomes Secretary of State, then there's going to be a special election for a Senate seat, and a certain former senator could potentially run in that special election, and there would be this chance that Scott Brown could be back in Washington. So the Republicans say emphatically and repeatedly, and to any reporter who will listen to them, we prefer John Kerry over Susan Rice for this job, please. And if John Kerry doesn't get Secretary of State, and he is maybe going to get Secretary of Defense instead, I say, woe be unto any feasible rival for that gig. Somebody who might get that cabinet position ahead of him, too, since that, too, would stop his Senate seat from opening up, which Republicans would please like to happen. And you know what? Maybe this is nuts. Maybe this is nuts. Maybe this is way too simplistic. But maybe this makes more sense than the contention we are supposed to believe, which is that 2 active investigations, multiple hours-long classified briefings, a statement from the president, a statement from the UN ambassador, a closed-door, more than an hour-long one-on-one meeting with that ambassador, and a personal one-on-one Ask Me Anything with the director of the CIA have not given John McCain enough opportunity to ask whatever questions it is he wants to ask about remarks made on a Sunday morning talk show 2.5 months ago. Maybe this makes more sense than that. Joining us now is somebody who is much more level-headed on these matters than I am, Andrea Mitchell, NBC's chief foreign affairs correspondent and the host of MSNBC's Andrea Mitchell Reports. Andrea, thank you so much for being here tonight.
It's my pleasure. I love your theories. And it makes as much sense as anything that's happening right now in Washington about this potential nomination.
Well, I wanted you to be here in part because I knew you would debunk my theory, right? Which is very obviously and admittedly born of frustration. Could any of this just be the manifestation of these Republican senators wanting John Kerry in that seat instead of somebody else?
I'm not sure, but we've all been scratching our heads over theories because there really is a reason to investigate Benghazi, and that's to investigate why after 5 attacks, not just intelligence warnings, but attacks, why the consulate wasn't closed, why security wasn't beefed up. That is what a very high-powered group ordered by Hillary Clinton under law is investigating for the State Department. It is led by Admiral Mike Mullen, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and former Ambassador Tom Pickering, a former Deputy Secretary of State, a former UN ambassador, men of the highest caliber. They have a blue panel group. They are going to report very soon. Report to Hillary Clinton. She has said she will not leave office before she personally presents it to Congress, which she is mandated to do. So this is going to be a very uncomfortable exit, arguably, for Secretary Clinton, because she's going to have to answer as to why the State Department did not improve security. That is what, presumably, these senators would be investigating. So Jay Carney and others in the White House are trying to scratch their heads and say, why is what was said on Sunday morning television, which is not under oath and it is not right out of the Old or New Testaments, why that has become writ so large, and why we're going through this with someone who has not yet been nominated. That is all rather curious.
And this is why I wanted to talk to you about it, because this is the thing that is so frustrating to me, that there are real things to talk about here. And why this attack was able to go so far that it actually killed the U.S. ambassador, why there wasn't better security, all of that stuff seems reasonable and is being investigated through the channels you think it would be investigated in. In terms of Susan Rice's predicament here, is she essentially just being caught up in a proxy war? I mean, her role in this, she had nothing to do, obviously, with the security matter, the substantive matter here. The picking on what happened on the Sunday show, is it a proxy for something else?
Well, I asked that very question today of someone who has understood these things, Nick Burns, far better than I, former ambassador, former top official both at the NSC and the State Department. And he said he thinks it is a proxy war. Maybe there is a personal issue between one or another of the senators and Susan Rice. She did work for John Kerry in the 2004 campaign. She worked for Barack Obama in the 2008 campaign. She was in the Clinton administration as an assistant secretary for Africa. Her policies in Africa, in Sudan in particular, were controversial. There are other issues that she has been involved in, but she's got a very big job at the UN. There are meetings on Thursday, and a General Assembly vote has been scheduled on Palestinian statehood, a symbolic vote, but a vote that has really gripped the attention post-Gaza of all of the Middle East and Middle East experts. And presumably the UN ambassador ought to be someone well regarded around the world, and is, and now she is sort of fighting for her future life in this very partisan atmosphere in Washington. It is very puzzling. The White House is sticking by her for now. She's not yet been nominated. Harry Reid put out a statement tonight saying that he believes that the committees that are in charge, Foreign Relations Committee chaired by John Kerry, should be in charge of this and not members from other committees like Homeland Security and Intelligence and Armed Services who are, getting involved in this. But as you pointed out, none of the senators, the Republican senators asking questions, chair anything. And it's becoming very personal and very puzzling indeed.
One last sort of puzzling element of this to me, Andrea, I just want your perspective on this because you've covered these matters for so long and you understand the context here, is that it seems sort of remarkable to me that you would have the acting director of the CIA personally accompanying Susan Rice to that meeting today. And again, this is not formal testimony before Congress. There is no committee of Kelly Ayotte, Lindsey Graham, and John McCain. They don't run anything there. Is it unusual or remarkable to have the leader of the CIA personally involved like this?
It was certainly remarkable to me, and it seemed as though I described her on Nightly News as her wingman. It seemed as though he was there to take the blame, to protect her, to defend her, to take some of the incoming. And it did seem for an acting director of the CIA to be put in that position rather extraordinary. He himself is under consideration to become the permanent CIA director. There is, of course, a lot of cabinet shuffling that may take place. Interesting that people are talking about the defense secretary as though the job were open. Leon Panetta has not said when he wants to leave, and he might want to stay longer by some reports. And John Kerry has not said that he'd be interested in that job. Some people have said that he would take it, but others, even closer to him, say that that is not the case, and no job has been offered. So this is, let's just put it awkward, because if she is nominated and if they do fight this through, who is going to chair that committee? And that hearing is the gentleman from Massachusetts, the senior senator, John Kerry.
It's not quite Kremlinology because it's America, but it's getting close to that. It's fascinating stuff.
Close, isn't it?
Andrea Mitchell, NBC's chief foreign affairs correspondent. Andrea, thank you so much. It's really great to have you here. Thank you.